My name is Russell Sutherland, and like Bart, I love the open mic. It's part of my tradition, our little community, and I wanted to thank Marilyn for the very warm welcome and the invite. I represent a little phase of life for Bart. We used to sort of as Bart Cross, sort of always went sort of together. So from 1967 to 1972. Bart and a few people here and shared the same institutional place of learning in high school in Scarborough. And I think if we look back on those years, these are very formative years. And so I want just to give you a little chronological slice, somewhat objective about Bart Cross. But before I do, there are some people here from Laurier. Sort of just shows that there is a lot of impact that we have on each other, even going way back. And in particular, Bob Bruce, Buffy Millen, and Vicki Wallace all send their warm greetings and condolences. Bart and I shared very few words together. I would say less than 400 over 5 years. But I am not atypical. No way am I atypical. One thing, though, that Bart and I share a lot in common is the genetic thing that gives you hair and takes it away. So I really feel I resonate a lot with Bart. So this is an outsider's view of Bart. I am, just by my nature, an observer and a retainer of character and of people. So I am an outsider, but as I'm saying, a lot of people in that stage, that important stage of his life, I think were outsiders. They were simply observing Bart and trying to figure him out. So here are the words, and of course it's based on 40 years of life experience and reflection on Bart Cross. And none of these words should be taken in any pejorative sense. This is the Bart Cross, I think, who we knew and tried to understand. First of all, Bart was an iconoclast. There was no effing way, that was what Bart would say, no way that he was just going to do and think like everyone else. He was in no way going to just assume the system, the structure was correct. Bart was misunderstood. I think back then we would look at him and say, that guy, you just don't figure him out. And I think we didn't give him enough credit. We didn't give him, I don't think, the place, the voice that he should have had. In that stage of life, as you know, peer pressure is very, very important. And so I think that most of us, myself, especially myself, did not understand Bart, and we were the poorer for it. Bart, of course, is an independent thinker. He's independent. He does his own thing, has his own basis, his own ideas, and along with that, not just a free thinker, but a very deep thinker. I think a lot more than most of us who were going on trends, pushed by hormones, just doing the things that we thought were cool in high school back in the 60s, sex, drugs, and rock and roll, all that stuff. I think Bart was thinking about life in a much more deep and much more mature way. So I've come to appreciate Bart as an artist. It took me 5 kids to figure out how important art was. I'm an engineer, I'm a nerd, and I sort of shunned all that stuff. The culture was telling me to shun all that stuff. And it wasn't until I had my 5th kid that I started to understand the beauty of art. And so Bart was an artist. And I've tried to define that, and for me, it's someone who just stops you and you say, wow. That for me is the essence of art, and that is what Bart, I believe, did to people had they had the time to listen to what he was saying. And specifically, he was a poet. And I should have known that, but I didn't. And think of yourself as a poet. in a sort of a sea of ignorance and muppets. And all through years of high school, you're writing gems. You're writing pure gold in grade 9, grade 10, grade 11, grade 12. And none of your stuff is being published. Does that sound similar? None of your stuff is being published. And then finally, you're in your final year, and finally, somehow, and I don't know the politics because I was not involved in that part of the high school world, but finally 2 of your poems get published in the yearbook. And I'm going to read both those poems to you. And I want to challenge you to see how deep they are. And I love poetry. My brother-in-law is a deep poet and helped me with poetry. And I'm thinking a lot about his last poem that I will read to you. But for me, the essence of a poet is to have an idea, a deep idea, a big idea, and through an economy of words, you write it down, and someone else who's been trained to read reads those words, and the economy of the words, and the beauty of the words, and in their brain, in their neurons, they begin to vibrate in the same way. The neurons are vibrating the same way in that person's brain as in the brain that you had and the ideas that you had. And to do that is clearly the height of all literature, to write poetry and to write it well. And so I'm going to read you these 2 poems. I think they're very important because these are some of his formative ideas. And as I say, I'll just read them. And a lot of them ring true as I think more and more about Bart that I've got to know recently. First one is called Hitler on the Beach. I met Hitler on the beach, goose-stepping along in the sand. He'd done it almost every weekend to keep up his fading parade. But he was so carried away, listening to the crunch of pebbles underfoot as his boot heel sank in the wet sand. I admire Hitler. Come rain or shine, he was there, strutting down the beach, Heil with a flick of his wrist, and he'd walk out of sight. He was a thinker, I could tell. He searched out the root of his problems, and he used that as the solution. Yes, sir, I used to admire Hitler, but he doesn't come here anymore. I guess he doesn't think as much. I'm waiting for him, hoping he'll meet me on the beach. But looking behind, I see he's got nothing to follow. The other poem, and he's the only person I think I've looked at some old yearbooks, only person who actually had 2 poems published in the same year. I think that was people trying to make up for what they should have done earlier. This one is a very deep piece that I'm still thinking about. It's called The Crucible Clown. Into the crucible of night we fade away, unconsciously treading in quiet dreams that may bind this day to the next, with tension sweat slowly drawn by watching these roads of canvas that no longer hold the scenarios of youth, but the path of a drunken clown, dancing merrily with our lives, half in his hands, that we may not awake. That's Bart. I want to give some personal reflections on all of this. I've gone through the loss of someone close to myself. Bart is gone. The moving finger writes and having writ moves on. And nothing we can do, nothing we can say can bring Bart back to us, or his genius, or his poetry. So for myself, what lessons in life do we have from Bart Cross? Again, these are subjective. Number one, ideas are important. They're ultimately, largely important ideas. And most people ignore ideas. They're replaced, they're trivialized. Bart's poetry is just swamped by daily doggerel and just sort of tepid gruel. That's the way it is. Bart has taught me that, like every other poet has. But fundamentally, ideas are meant to be shared. The neurons in the poet's brain are meant to be vibrating in our brain. Ideas fundamentally are meant to be shared. Now, I'm a Christian. Jesus, who I think is one of the greatest poets of all time, said many times, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." So let's not miss what Bart has left for us. And finally, with sort of a bittersweet thing, I want to share a little thing between Bart and myself. It's personal, but I don't think he would mind me reading it. I've heard recently of Bart's medical problems, and I feel deeply about sharing ideas with people. Especially in these formative years, I think there's just an organic thing that people have. Hope I'm not going on too long, but I just want to finish with this little email. How mundane, but how rich this is for me. I said, "Bart, let's meet for coffee." I wanted to meet Bart for coffee because I haven't done it in 40 years. And I realized I want some of his ideas to resonate in my brain, and maybe some of my ideas in his. Hey Russell, apologize for the delay or repeating myself. I had sent an email saying, "Hey, let's meet for coffee." Things have changed for the better. This is on February the 7th of this year. But the whole brain surgery thing is happening at a fast clip, so I have to make sure that I have a day open. Always good to get away. I have a meeting with the surgeon on a Wednesday. After that, I will know what my schedule is, and we can meet up. God, I sound so special, as if the whole world revolves around my brain. Regards, Bart Cross. I missed that opportunity. It just wasn't going to happen. And so for myself, let's not miss opportunities to share ideas in the future. Thanks very much.